Hi, my name is Sam, and I am the Program Manager at Urban Conservancy, a nonprofit in New Orleans focused on equitable land use. The Urban Conservancy has been around for about 20 years. We've done all sorts within and for the built environment. One of our largest programs, the Front Yard Initiative, or FYI, is the UC's response to excessive paving in New Orleans. We help individuals remove unwanted paving from their properties and implement water-smart solutions, such as green infrastructure, to promote a more beautiful and resilient New Orleans. Here in New Orleans, living with water can mean that an average rain event turns your front yard into a duck pond. Let's explore some of the unique aspects of our environment that make living with water in New Orleans so challenging. The most obvious being the amount of rain we experience. We live in one of the rainiest areas of the country. We usually receive an average of 63 inches of rain a year, but we've already exceeded that back in August. Climate change is increasing the frequency and strength of storms, and this will only continue into the future. And even though we have less rainy days than other cities, we are still receiving more precipitation. That's because when it does rain here, it pours. This quick deluge of water can and does quickly overwhelm our drainage system. But rain isn't our only challenge. As you can see from this map, New Orleans sits at a very low elevation. The areas in blue are below sea level, and the areas in red are above, with most red areas being near the river and lake. About 50% of the city sits below sea level, fluctuating between around 15 feet below and 10 feet above. This is really different from places that can vary in hundreds of feet in elevation. Most of New Orleans used to be above sea level. Early New Orleans was only situated on high land created from the river overtopping seasonally, which deposited sediment and created new land. But as technology advanced, people were able to pump out water and make what was once marshland habitable for long periods of time. This had the added cost of subsidence. Subsidence is the sinking of land. Many of you are probably overly familiar with this concept. Subsidence leads to foundations shifting and sinking for homes, potholes that appear overnight, and yes, more flooding. New Orleans is particularly susceptible to subsidence due to high levels of shrink swell soils, such as clay, found in the native soils. These soils swell when wet but rapidly shrink when dried out. Overdevelopment has also exacerbated our flooding issue. As you can see from this aerial view of New Orleans, what was once all wetlands has been almost completely paved over. We have taken a permeable surface and made it impermeable. This leaves us to rely almost solely on the city's pumping system to remove stormwater and prevents the water table from being naturally recharged, leading to further subsidence. That excessive amount of impermeable surfaces is creating more runoff, and that's runoff that our drainage system can't handle. The Sewage and Water Board website says that an intense rainstorm that drops more than an inch of water in an hour will most likely outpace the system's capability, the system being our drainage system. We all know that a rainstorm that only drops an inch of rain in an hour is not very intense for New Orleans, nor is it uncommon. Despite this, we have an excessive amount of impermeable surfaces that are creating 36 times more runoff than green spaces. Finally, we are overly reliant on inadequate and antiquated gray infrastructure. Gray infrastructure refers to traditional forms of water management, such as levees, floodgates, and pumping systems. At the city level, we've heavily relied on a single approach to water management. Every drop that falls must be pumped out. This approach is not only resource intensive, but is also a leading cause of subsidence in our region. So we end up at an even lower elevation than where we started, and now we have these great big concrete walls, yes, preventing seasonal flooding, but also preventing new soil being introduced to our quickly depleting lands. Part of the reason our gray infrastructure fails regularly is because of its age. This is a map taken from the Sewage and Water Board's website. Everything in red represents a water pipe that was installed over 80 years ago. According to the Sewage and Water Board, industry standards suggest typical water mains have a life expectancy of only about 50 years. Pipes meant to convey runoff away from the streets and homes are degraded, so degraded, in fact, that they are described as Swiss cheese sometimes when replaced. This all leads us to where we are now. Where do we go from here? That's a rough one. There are no clear-cut, easy solutions, and a lot of the steps that need to be taken are not within any one individual's control. However, one small step in the right direction is residential green infrastructure. By removing impermeable surfaces and installing green infrastructure, residents can help reduce flood risk and subsidence. This is the after picture to the original duck pond we looked at earlier, after an equivalent rain event. This resident took that small step and replaced their concrete with green infrastructure. All the rainfall is held on site in a bioswale in a permeable driveway instead of sitting next to their foundation and flooding their car. Rain has changed from a stressful event to a peaceful one. The homeowners no longer have to rush out to move their cars or create makeshift bridges to reach their home. And since they are at a lower elevation than the surrounding area, they are also reducing flood risk for their neighbors. Green infrastructure and plants not only help reduce the threat of flooding, but have multiple benefits. For example, added trees decrease the heat island effect. Native plants bring back lost habitat important to wildlife and pollinators, and new green spaces encourage people to get outside. So what is green infrastructure? Green infrastructure can come in many forms, but it is basically any system that mimics nature to manage stormwater. There are three main ways green infrastructure helps manage stormwater: retention, detention, and filtration. Retention is the holding of water, so when stormwater is retained, it will never go into our drainage system and instead be absorbed into the ground, watering our plants, recharging the water table, and stabilizing our soils. Detention is the slowing down of water, so when stormwater is detained, it will eventually go into our drainage system. The difference is that the runoff has time to be partially absorbed into the ground, and not all of our runoff is rushing into the drainage system at once. This alleviates pressure and reduces the risk of overwhelming the drainage system. Filtration is exactly what it sounds like. Green infrastructure removes pollutants from our stormwater. There are actually no filtration systems in place for stormwater, so when runoff hits our catch basins, it gets pumped into Lake Pontchartrain as is. This, as you can imagine, not good. Let's take a look at some popular forms of green infrastructure. Native plants are one of the easiest but still extremely effective forms of green infrastructure. Native plants have evolved alongside our ecosystem for a very, very long time, making them well suited to thrive here. They are made to survive our hot summers, our occasional freezes, our deluges, our dry periods, our humidity, our soils, you name it. So this means less time spent on maintenance, less money spent on replacement plants, and that you are creating lost habitat for native pollinators, birds, and other critters. Native plants are also just plain beautiful and add to the singular culture of New Orleans. So how do native plants aid in water management? Well, just check out the roots. Turf grass has roots less than 1 foot compared to switchgrass, whose roots grow up to 9 feet. The deeper the roots, the more rainwater they're absorbing. Roots hold soil in place, preventing subsidence and erosion, and at the same time aerates the soil, keeping it flexible and preventing compaction. Plus, this is why native plants do better during our long stretches of dry weather. Their roots have evolved in order to be able to reach groundwater. Some plants are even known to remove harsh pollutants from our water and soil. You can take your native plants a step further and plant them in a rain garden. Rain gardens are another popular, but a bit more involved type of green infrastructure. They're an excavated area that uses specific soil mixes and native water-loving plants to create storage space for water, slowing, retaining, and filtering stormwater before it reaches our drainage system. Here's a good look at the excavation required to build a rain garden. Somewhere between 6 inches and 3 feet is best. When you fill the garden bed, you want to use a well-draining soil to encourage runoff to infiltrate. A mix of 80 to 90% sand, 10 to 20% topsoil, and 3 to 5% organic matter or compost is commonly used. There are some local shops that sell rain garden soil-specific mixes, such as Schmelly's. Sand is made of large particles that create void space for water to seep into. The mostly clay soil that is super prevalent in New Orleans, on the other hand, is often so compacted that it can almost be as impermeable as concrete. It also isn't healthy enough to sustain the new environment you are trying to create. Here's a cross-sectional view of a rain garden. You can see, like most green infrastructures, that there's a lot going on underneath the surface that aids in water management. Some rain gardens keep it simple, such as the colorful image, while other rain gardens use multiple layers and different materials to optimize water infiltration, such as the black and white image. Bioretention areas are similar to rain gardens, but are typically larger and used for non-residential sites. They may also have an underdrain to allow for more water storage capacity. But like rain gardens, the main components that make a bioretention area different from your typical garden bed are high draining soils, native water-loving plants, and grading to control water flow. Permeable surfaces are another form of green infrastructure. Pictured here is a geogrid and crushed gravel being installed for a permeable driveway. Permeable surfaces can include permeable driveways, pathways, patios, or infiltration trenches, otherwise known as French drains. This creates storage space for stormwater to go and maintains a stable area suitable for light vehicular and pedestrian traffic. The pictured driveway can hold over 2,000 gallons of stormwater. The homeowner's first floor used to flood during a typical rain event, but now, even after 5 inches of rain, they are left with no standing water. Remember, most of what makes green infrastructure effective is what's going on beneath the surface. As you can see here, an area has been excavated with the middle dug even deeper for a perforated pipe to be placed. This creates more storage space for runoff and controls the conveyance of that runoff. The pipe is then covered with number 57 washed gravel, which creates void space for water to be stored. Then the whole area is covered with a non-woven permeable filter fabric. This prevents debris from clogging the void space in order to maintain the installation's permeability over time. The finished product is a permeable driveway and a rain garden that holds an estimated 4,000 gallons of stormwater. You can even have permeable pathways within a garden. The gravel paths link water storage throughout. This is a good example of a mix of materials working together for compounding effects. Here's an example of a unique permeable patio made of reclaimed broken concrete with mondo grass planted between. It keeps the patio feel without sacrificing permeability. But some patios are deeply excavated and backfilled with aggregate in order to create a lot of storage space for stormwater, such as this next one. This homeowner, Miss D, was experiencing standing water issues days after rain. She would even get water inside of her house. The issue was exacerbated after her neighbor put in an impermeable patio. This caused a lot of the neighbor's runoff to go into her yard. As you can see from this video, this permeable patio is not only a great stormwater management tool, but a quality of life improvement as well. Rain barrels are another form of green infrastructure. They capture runoff from impermeable surfaces, such as a roof, and hold that stormwater for later use. The rain barrels pictured are directly connected to the home's rain gutters. This is an example of detaining water. The rain barrels are not meant to hold this water forever, but are preventing it from going into the drainage system for the moment. Rain barrels work best alongside rain gardens or infiltration trenches as pictured. This way they can be easily drained before the next storm. There's no point in holding the same 50 gallons of stormwater indefinitely. Rain barrels may not have the largest capacity for storing stormwater, but they encourage people to view stormwater as a resource, not just a nuisance. Rainwater is also better for plants. There are many more forms of green infrastructure, such as this constructed wetland. They vary in scale and purpose, but ultimately strive to achieve the same thing: managing water in a sustainable manner. We've already seen some, but let's take a look at some local examples of residential green infrastructure. This is the permeable patio from the video we watched earlier. It had rained while under construction. The middle photo gives you a good idea of the amount of stormwater this small patio is holding beneath the surface. A lot of people in New Orleans experience this specific issue. This tiny side alley is made inaccessible because it's always muddy and overgrown. You get a lot of standing water under the house that creates mosquito population issues, foundation problems, and even termite infestations like this homeowner experienced. But now, instead of standing water for days on end, they have a French drain that captures runoff from their roof and from their neighbor. A lot of people want to keep their parking spaces but still want to reduce flooding issues. These are two great examples where the homeowners aren't sacrificing any hard surfaces but are still holding a large amount of stormwater. These driveways are no longer contributing to flooding and are less likely to drown your car. A cost-effective alternative to removing an entire driveway is to remove only part of it. A French drain or infiltration trench can be installed down the middle to increase the permeability and water storage capacity of this small space. There are multiple options for the surface of a permeable driveway. The paver used in this project are not permeable, but they are spaced at least 1/8 of an inch apart, which allows for water to seep into the storage space underneath the surface. Remember, a lot of green infrastructure has to do with what is happening underneath the surface. This driveway was excavated 2 feet and backfilled with aggregate to create storage space for an estimated 2,600 gallons of stormwater. This permeable pathway is using a unique cobblestone paver in its design. These homeowners replaced their old impermeable sidewalk with an ADA-compliant permeable sidewalk. The bricks are not mortared in and are instead set in sand. You can also see that they added a rain garden next to their house and in the right-of-way with some trees. Another cool thing about permeable surfaces such as this sidewalk is that if part of it breaks, it is much easier and cost-effective to fix than concrete. A permeable driveway or pathway is a good option for people who aren't big gardeners. But of course, there are options for people who are big gardeners. These homeowners designed overflowing gardens with edible, native, and ornamental plants. These installations attract pollinators, birds, and provide food for the homeowners. These two projects are a great example of how green infrastructure can provide economic, health, and environmental benefits while reducing flood risk, unlike gray infrastructure, which only has one purpose and can often be working against the other benefits green infrastructure brings. Only 1,000 square feet of concrete was removed from this yard, but is now able to hold around 33 gallons of stormwater. To put this in perspective, this 1,000 square foot rain garden is holding stormwater for over 3,500 square feet of impermeable surfaces during an 1.5-inch rain event. The public right-of-way is the space between the sidewalk and the street. It's the city's property, but you can remove excessive paving and install green infrastructure or a colorful garden like this one. It's a great example of how even tiny spaces can be transformed to greatly enhance your outdoors and to manage stormwater. Green infrastructure isn't just about stormwater management, but creating a more aesthetic, healthy environment for everyone to live in. This homeowner connected an above-ground pond to her gutter. She filled it with native water-loving plants and has a pump to prevent mosquito growth. Kids around the neighborhood love to go visit this new amenity. The examples of local residential green infrastructure we just looked at were from FYI participants. They had to observe their property and design their project on paper. This really gets participants involved in thinking about their stormwater and how to best manage it. This is a great exercise to start imagining how any area can better serve the environment and people. On screen are some elements to begin your very own Gray to Green design. Be sure to include things such as your name, address, and existing features, and the new green infrastructure features you plan to create. It's helpful to measure out the area you plan to put your design in square footage. Grid paper can be very helpful during this process. Here are some more elements we suggest including in designs. Feel free to pause the video and review the list, or visit our website, urbanconservancy.org, to find a list of all of our resources. Here's a very detailed hand-drawn design that lists the many different types of plants the homeowner planned to use. They even drew out the wavy gravel path. This homeowner wasn't big on drawing each aspect of their design, so they wrote down what they planned to use where instead. But you certainly can draw everything and use a legend. Feel free to get creative with it and do what works best for you. I hope some of those projects caught your interest, inspired you to do some of your own green designs. Let's review the difference between a block that relies solely on gray infrastructure and a block that integrates green infrastructure. This is an unhealthy block. Rain falls, hits paved impermeable surfaces, runs into the street, and often overwhelms the drainage system, causing flooding. This does not allow for the water table to be naturally recharged and causes subsidence. We commonly have issues such as foundation shifting and sinking and potholes due to subsidence because of our high content of shrink swell soils, such as clay. A lack of green space encourages cars to park on sidewalks and front lawns. This is unsafe for pedestrians and can cause underground utility damage for your home. In contrast, this is a healthy block. What you see here is a lot of green space, native trees and plants. Cars are parked on the street instead of their yards and sidewalks. There's overall less impermeable surfaces. A healthy block handles water on site. Rain falls, and instead of being pumped out, it soaks into the soil. This reduces flood risk and recharges the water table, slowing subsidence and keeping our soils stable. Thank you so much for listening. Here's a bunch of ways to connect with us online. Please feel free to follow up with us with any questions you may have. You can email us at fyi@urbanconservancy.org or give us a call at 504-717-6187.